My stepkids said I was nobody in the very house I paid for. I packed up their things, took back their allowance and gifted phones, and dropped them off at their dad's. Don't forget to subscribe and share your experiences below. Let's get started. You're not my real dad. The words weren't shouted. They weren't spat with teenage venom. Chris, 15 years old then, said them in a flat tone, almost casual, like he was reminding me of some small fact I had overlooked. He sat on the edge of his bed, his phone glowing in his hands, his eyes never even lifting toward me as he delivered that line. Maddie smirked at his side, her head tilted like she enjoyed watching the blow land. Sam didn't say anything, but the way he avoided my eyes told me enough. Silence is sometimes the loudest agreement. That was the first time I heard it, though it wouldn't be the last. My name is Michael. I'm 44 years old. By trade, I'm a mechanic. Grease on my knuckles, calluses on my palms, the smell of oil and steel clinging to me no matter how hard I scrub. I've lived my life fixing things that other people broke. Engines seized up from neglect. Frames bent by reckless drivers. Cars that people gave up on, that I brought back to life piece by piece. I believed families weren't so different. Broken things could be repaired if you had the patience and the will. That belief is what made me walk into Laura's life. She was 38 when I met her, living in a small rental in Houston with her 3 kids. The place was worn thin, water stains on the ceiling, an air conditioner that rattled louder than it cooled, a yard overgrown with weeds that nobody had the heart to cut. She carried herself with the weary grace of someone who'd been left to do it all alone. Her ex-husband, the children's father, had drifted in and out of their lives when it suited him. He sent the occasional text, sometimes showed up with promises, but he was more ghost than man in that house. Laura looked at me like I was solid ground, and I looked at her kids like a second chance. Chris was 15, restless and tall for his age, with that teenage air of being too big for the world he lived in. Maddie, 13, sharp-tongued and always watching, always calculating. Sam, 11, still small enough to run into the room with excitement, still young enough to hope. I saw them and thought, if I give them stability, if I give them love, they will come to see me as their own. That belief was the engine that drove me. I started small, helping with homework, fixing their bikes, showing up at every school event whether they wanted me there or not. I took Chris to football practice, sat with Maddie when she painted her nails and rolled her eyes, built Lego castles with Sam until midnight. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always welcomed, but I told myself that family isn't built in a day. Family is built in the moments that seem small until you look back and realize they were everything. A year into our relationship, I made the move I thought would cement us as one. I bought a house. Not just a house, but a home. It was in the suburbs of Dallas, a step up from everything we'd known. A 2-story with a wide porch and a big backyard where the kids could play, with a garage I could turn into my workshop. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where you could hear sprinklers ticking in the evening and kids' laughter echoing down the streets. The mortgage was heavy, but I shouldered it without hesitation. I worked longer hours at the shop, picked up extra shifts when I could, spent weekends hauling drywall and paint cans. Laura promised she'd handle groceries and bills while I covered the mortgage and renovations. It sounded like a partnership, a beginning. I remember the day we first walked into that house as a family. Chris raced straight to the basement, eyes wide when he saw the open space. This could be a game room, he said, and I promised him it would be. Maddie picked the room with the biggest window, talking about how she'd hang curtains and string lights. Sam ran in circles in the yard until he collapsed laughing in the grass. Laura stood in the kitchen, her eyes wet as she whispered, "This is the start of our life together." I believed her. I poured myself into making that house ours. I built Chris his game room, hauling down furniture, setting up an old TV, wiring it for internet. I repainted Maddie's walls the exact shade of lavender she wanted, hanging those lights for her myself. I built a treehouse for Sam, even though my back ached and my hands blistered, because I wanted him to look at it and think, Michael made this for me. I thought these things would mean something. I thought they would grow into respect. Those early days fooled me. For a while, the gratitude was real. The kids laughed when I cooked barbecue in the backyard. They cheered when I brought home a second-hand trampoline and set it up in the yard. Laura kissed me in the doorway at night and whispered, "They're starting to love you," and I let myself believe it. I let myself believe that money, labor, and presence could bridge the gap blood had left. I let myself believe that every late-night shift at the garage, every dollar I poured into that mortgage, every scraped knuckle from building shelves and swings and fixing faucets was an investment in something permanent. I thought I was repairing a family. I thought I was giving them a new life. But the truth is simple, and it took me years to face it. Some people will take everything you give and never return even a shred of respect. Still, back then, I couldn't see it. I was blinded by the hope that one day Chris would call me Dad, that Maddie would look at me without rolling her eyes, that Sam would keep calling me Mike with the warmth that meant I mattered. I told myself, love earns respect. Sacrifice builds loyalty. I had fixed broken engines, rebuilt wrecked cars, resurrected machines people thought were beyond saving. Surely a family could be rebuilt the same way. Surely all I needed was time. And so I worked and I gave and I believed. Respect is a fragile thing. At first I thought it was growing, like ivy climbing up the walls of the house I had built. But over time I realized it wasn't ivy at all. It was rot, spreading quietly, eating at the beams, hollowing out everything I thought was solid. It began in small ways. Chris stopped saying thank you. It wasn't that he said the words less. He stopped saying them entirely. I'd hand him money for lunch, drive him to practice, fix his broken earbuds. Nothing. Just a grunt, a nod, sometimes not even that. Maddie, who once asked for my help hanging shelves or picking paint colors, began rolling her eyes whenever I spoke. Sam, the one who had once called me Mike with boyish warmth, reverted back to Michael, flat, formal, distant. At first, I told myself it was normal. Teenagers were moody. They were finding themselves, pushing boundaries, testing authority. But there was something sharper in it, something deliberate. They weren't just indifferent. They were erasing me. It was most obvious at school events. I'd drive them to sports games, sit in the bleachers, cheer louder than anyone else. But when their friends asked who I was, I heard the answers, "That's my mom. That's my brother. That's my sister." No mention of me. No space for me in their picture of family. I tried to laugh it off the first time. "Guess I'm invisible," I joked to Laura afterward, waiting for her to reassure me. She didn't. She just smiled faintly and said, "They're kids, Michael. They'll grow out of it." But they didn't grow out of it. They grew into it. Every year that passed, they treated me less like a father and more like a fixture. I paid the mortgage. I bought the groceries when Laura's paycheck fell short. I kept the cars running. I funded their school trips, their braces, their new phones, their endless wants. But to them, I was just a wallet with hands. 5 years after we moved into that house, Laura and I got married. I thought that would change everything. Surely making it official would matter. Surely if I stood before them, before God and witnesses, as their mother's husband, they would understand that I wasn't going anywhere, that I was part of this family in name, not just in effort. The wedding itself was beautiful, at least on the surface. Laura wore a dress that made her look younger than I'd ever seen her. We stood in a small chapel surrounded by family and a few friends. Chris wore a suit, Maddie a simple dress, Sam fidgeted with his tie. They stood there with us, but not for us. Their faces were stiff, their smiles forced, their eyes anywhere but on me. Later that evening, when most of the guests had gone, I overheard Maddie on the phone with a friend. Her voice was light, dismissive, almost mocking. "Yeah, Mom married Michael. He pays for everything, so it makes sense. Not he loves us. Not he's good to us. Just he pays." Those words echoed in my head like a curse. Still, I tried to address it. I thought maybe sitting them down and speaking openly could change things. One evening, I gathered them at the kitchen table. Laura sat quietly beside me as I explained what respect meant, what family meant, what I expected in this house. I told them I wasn't trying to replace their father, but I was their stepfather, their mother's husband, the man who had been there for years. Chris leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression full of contempt. "You married Mom," he said flatly. "But that doesn't make you our dad." Maddie nodded. "Exactly. You can't just come in and tell us what to do." Even Sam, the youngest, chimed in, "Yeah, you're just Michael." And Laura? She stayed silent. She didn't correct them. She didn't tell them I was right. She just sat there, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes lowered, as if silence could save her from taking a side. That silence cut deeper than their words, because it told me the truth. I was alone in this fight. It didn't matter that I worked 12-hour days at the shop to keep up with the mortgage. It didn't matter that I had poured nearly every cent I had into their comfort. It didn't matter that I had built a home from the ground up for kids who weren't mine. To them, I was an outsider. To her, I was convenient. But still, I clung to hope. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was pride, maybe it was the desperate belief that all my sacrifices couldn't have been for nothing. I told myself that in time, when they were older, when they saw what I had done, they would look back and say, "Michael was there. Michael carried us. Michael was our family." But the cracks only spread. Chris began locking his door whenever I walked past, glaring at me like I was intruding in his space. Maddie started spending more and more time online, rolling her eyes whenever I asked her about her day, answering only to Laura. Sam avoided me altogether, slipping into rooms without a word. And still, Laura excused it. "They're teenagers," she'd say. "They'll grow out of it." But what if they didn't? What if this was who they truly were? That question haunted me every night as I lay in bed beside the woman I had married. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the house I'd built, the years I'd given, the children I had raised in every way but blood. And I wondered if any of it mattered, if respect was ever going to come, or if I was destined to always be what Maddie had named me that night after the wedding. The man who pays. And deep down, I already knew the answer. Respect doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes grain by grain, until one day you look down and realize the ground beneath you is gone. For years I told myself that the cracks in this family could be mended, that silence and contempt were just the storms of adolescence. But storms pass. What I lived through was not a storm. It was corrosion. The final truth revealed itself in whispers, though not meant for my ears. It was a Saturday evening. I'd spent the day changing the brakes on Laura's car, repairing a leak under the kitchen sink, and mowing the lawn until my shirt clung to my skin with sweat. I remember standing in the hallway, wiping my hands on a rag, when I heard their voices carry from the kitchen. Chris, Maddie, and Sam. All of them huddled together, believing I was nowhere near. Chris's voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. "Michael thinks he runs this family. He's just the guy who pays bills." Maddie laughed, that cruel little laugh she'd perfected. "Exactly. He's not our dad. He needs to know his place." And then Sam, sweet Sam, the one I thought still had room for me, added, "This is our house, not his. Our house, not mine." The house I had bled for, worked endless shifts for, poured my life into. They claimed it as theirs, stripped me from it with a single sentence. I stood frozen in the hallway, their words echoing against the walls I had painted, bouncing off the furniture I had built, seeping into the very foundation I had laid for them. And something inside me broke. Not loudly, not in anger, but quietly, with the finality of a snapped bone. That night, I sat alone in the garage with a stack of folders and receipts. Years of bills, mortgage payments, allowances, school fees, braces, clothes, vacations, phones, gadgets, food. Every line, every dollar, every sacrifice I had made in black and white. When I added it all together, the number made me dizzy. Nearly $500,000 over 7 years. $500,000, spent not on my own blood, but on children who despised me. The next weeks were a blur of clarity. I stopped lying to myself. I stopped telling myself this was temporary, that respect was waiting around the corner. I looked at the reality on paper and decided the truth. If I was just the man who paid, then I would stop paying. The breaking point came at dinner, as all breaking points do, in a moment that looked ordinary until it wasn't. We sat around the table, plates of food laid out, the sound of forks clinking against porcelain. Chris scrolled on his phone, barely looking up. Maddie whispered to Sam and stifled a laugh. Laura tried to keep the peace, asking about school, about weekend plans. I sat in silence, watching the three faces I had fed for years, listening to the faint hum of contempt that had become the background music of our lives. And then Chris said it. He didn't even look at me when he spoke. "You're not our dad. You don't get to boss us around." Maddie smirked and piled on. "Yeah, this isn't even your house." Sam, emboldened, delivered the final blow. "You're nobody here. Nobody." The word landed like a hammer. I set my fork down carefully, slowly, as though the weight of my rage might shatter it. I looked at them one by one, and then at Laura, who sat frozen, her lips pressed tight, her eyes avoiding mine. She didn't defend me. She didn't stop them. She never did. "You're right," I said calmly. My voice was steady, almost gentle. "I do need to know my place." And in that moment, I knew exactly what that place was. Not in their house, not in their story, not in their lives. The next morning, I acted. I woke early, before the sun had risen, and began packing. Not my things, theirs. Chris's clothes, Maddie's makeup and books, Sam's toys and gadgets. Every item bought with my money, folded neatly into bags and boxes. I collected the phones I had purchased for them, the laptops, the tablets. I emptied drawers of allowance envelopes and gift cards. Every luxury I had provided, every comfort, every convenience, I took it all back. When they woke, their confusion filled the air like smoke. "What are you doing?" Chris demanded, his voice sharp with outrage. "Packing," I said simply. "Why?" Maddie shrieked, her face pale. "Because you're right," I replied, my voice calm, my movements precise. "This isn't my house. I'm not your dad. I'm nobody here. And nobodies don't pay for your lives." Laura followed me from room to room, her face twisted in shock. "Michael, stop. What are you doing? You can't just—" I cut her off with a look so cold she went silent. "I can. And I am." By noon, their things were in the car. I loaded the bags, slammed the trunk, and called for them to get in. They protested, shouted, begged for explanations. I gave them none. I drove through the suburbs, their voices rising in panic and anger, until we pulled into the driveway of a rundown duplex. Their father's place. The man they spoke of with reverence. The ghost they held above me. The blood they valued more than my sacrifice. I knocked on the door until it opened. He stood there, bleary-eyed, unshaven, surprise painted across his face. "They're yours," I said simply. "Take care of them." His eyes widened, his mouth opened, but no words came. Behind me, Chris shouted, Maddie cried. Sam clung to Laura's sleeve. I didn't flinch. I unloaded the bags onto the curb, one after another, until the trunk was empty. And then I handed Laura a binder, receipts, bills, proof of every dollar I had spent. $500,000 of sacrifice, reduced to ink and paper. "This is what I've given," I told her. "This is what you've wasted." Her lips trembled. Her eyes shone with tears, but she said nothing. I looked at the three faces staring at me with disbelief, anger, and fear. "You said I was nobody. Now you get to live as though that's true." And with that, I turned, got into my car, and drove away. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not happy, not yet, but free. I had stopped being their wallet with hands. The house was silent when I returned that night. For years, silence had been my enemy. Those tense dinners where the only sound was the scrape of forks. Those car rides where no one spoke to me. But this silence was different. It was clean. It was mine. I sat in the living room, binder of receipts on the table, a glass of whiskey in my hand. For the first time in 7 years, I felt no obligation pressing down on me. No voices demanding, no eyes rolling, no invisible weight of being used. The quiet felt like oxygen. But silence never lasts. The calls began that very evening. Laura's number flashed across my phone. I let it ring. Then came the texts, dozens of them. "Michael, we need to talk. This isn't right. You can't just walk away from them." I read each one, then set the phone down without answering. The next day, more messages. This time from Chris. Short, angry bursts. You're a coward. You ruined everything. You'll regret this. Maddie's came later, longer, dramatic, laced with blame. Do you even know what you've done to us? We can't go back to that place. We can't live like this. You're destroying Mom. Sam's message broke me for half a second. Michael, please, just come back. Things can go back to normal. Normal. The word was almost funny. Normal had been me paying while they sneered. Normal had been me building a life they trampled on. Normal was the prison I had escaped. I didn't reply. Days passed. I heard from mutual friends that the kids were struggling. No more internet. No more after-school activities. No more allowances. Their biological father couldn't cover even half of what I had provided. Bills piled up. Comforts vanished. Reality, sharp and unrelenting, pressed down on them. Laura called again, her voice breaking on the voicemail. Michael, please. They're just kids. They don't understand. You can't do this to them. But I remembered her silence at the kitchen table. I remembered her folded hands, her lowered eyes, when her children told me I wasn't their father. She hadn't defended me then. Why should I defend her now? Weeks turned into months. The letters began. Handwritten, as if paper could carry more sincerity than a text. Chris's was bitter. I don't care about you, but you ruined my life. I needed college, and now I don't know if I can even go. You think this makes you strong? It just proves you're weak. Maddie's was manipulative. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, but you know we're just kids. Kids say things they don't mean. Isn't family supposed to forgive? Sam's was the closest to genuine. I miss the way things were. I didn't mean it when I said you were nobody. Please come back. Please be my Mike again. But even in his words, I heard it. Not regret. Not respect. Just desperation for the comforts I had taken away. I never replied. A year passed. I built a new routine. Early mornings at the shop. Evenings in the quiet of a home that finally belonged to me. For the first time, I invested in myself. New tools, new hobbies, even a small fishing boat. My money went where I wanted it to go, not into the endless void of ungrateful mouths. And then, one evening at a community event, I met Emily. She was a teacher. No children of her own. A woman who carried herself with calm and kindness, who asked about my life and actually listened. When I fixed her car a week later, she insisted on paying, even though I waved it off. No, she said firmly, smiling. I respect your work. I pay for what I value. Respect. That word I had been starving for. With Emily, things were simple. We shared dinners, long walks, quiet mornings over coffee. She treated me not as a wallet, not as a placeholder, but as a man. We grew close, and within a year we were planning our wedding. Sometimes, in the grocery store or driving through town, I'd see Laura. Sometimes with one of the kids, sometimes alone. Her face looked older, drawn, her eyes tired. The children, no, not children anymore, looked weary, weighed down, like they had been carrying burdens they never thought they'd have to. Chris had abandoned his plans for college, working odd jobs just to scrape by. Maddie's sharpness had dulled, her ambition clipped by the reality of bills and debt. Sam, still the youngest, looked lost, as though the foundation beneath him had cracked too soon. They would glance at me sometimes, but never approach. Their eyes held something, regret, maybe, or recognition of what they had thrown away. But it was too late, because I remembered. I remembered the night at the table when they told me I was nobody. The night Laura sat silent as her children erased me. The night I finally accepted the truth. That was the day I found my place. And my place was anywhere but with them. Now, as I prepare to marry Emily, I feel no guilt. I gave Laura and her children 7 years of my life. I gave them a home, stability, a future. I gave them love, respect, sacrifice. And in return, they gave me contempt. So I cut them off. And in cutting them off, I finally cut free. Still, at night, when the house is quiet, when Emily sleeps peacefully beside me, I sometimes hear their voices again. Chris's defiance, Maddie's scorn, Sam's small voice calling me Michael. And above it all, the one word that shattered everything, nobody. They wanted me to be nobody. And so, I became nobody to them. But here is the truth I live with now. Being nobody to them allowed me to finally be somebody to myself. And yet I ask you, whoever hears this, was I wrong? Was I too cold, too final, too merciless? Should I have stayed? Should I have forgiven? Should I have endured the contempt of children who were not mine, all for the sake of calling something family? Or was I right that respect is the price of love, and without it, there is nothing but slavery? Tell me, would you have endured it?